that's just SOC though.
Right. Well, you didn't specify how it
Yeah.
was spelled. You just mentioned
Yeah,
sock.
socks.
So I
Well,
didn't know.
because I don't know if you know this about me, but I care about my feet a lot.
Mm.
Uh,
Mm.
and
Well,
so
you gotta keep those money makers happy. If you're gonna have those
yeah,
foot accounts where you sell pictures of your feet,
yeah,
you gotta keep them
that's right.
as
I'm a
foot model.
foot model on the side.
Yeah. Yeah.
But I'm curious, Helmet, if you were a foot model, what would be some of the strategies you would use to protect your feet?
I love it. I would probably moisturize more. I'd probably run less.
Capsaicin.
Probably, yeah, exactly right. Do something with like I'd shave off more calluses and probably that kind of thing. Um, no, but obviously, packs were joking just a little. But one of the things that I do think is interesting to note, and I'll just tell you this: earlier last year, when F3 kind of worked with Mudgear to take over the store. So Mudgear always kind of owned the store, the gear store, and ran the gear store. And F3 reworked the contract, and now we own the gear store. It's ours proper, right? Mudgear runs it, but it is our gear store. And so one of the things that Malco and I did was sit down and say, hey, if we're going to have a gear store, if we're going to have anything that relates to F3, it needs a mission. We're going to have a clear vision and a clear mission of what it is we're trying to get done around here. And one of the things that we both decided on and thought was super important was that everything that we do, everything that we carry in the gear store would make men more durable, more useful, those kinds of things. And so we would only carry products that either helped a man become more durable and useful or that they themselves were durable and useful. And in the case of a Mudgear sock, I would say, it kind of serves both purposes, right? It puts a man in good standing, good position where he can get out there and do the CSOPs, do the tough things, post in the gloom, all that kind of stuff that we would want you to do to become more durable and more useful, while also being durable and useful. Because I have socks that I've had for, I wore some this morning, a little pair of reflecty socks. When you're going out for a run, you gotta, it's good to have reflective gear. I refuse to put on the vest anymore, but the little reflecty socks. And I don't mind a headlamp every once in a while, depending on where we're going. But I try to be visible. Although some guys get really worked about that, like being visible and having reflective things. But yeah, so I think things that make you more durable and are more useful are to be brought into your life. I think that's an important thing.
Mm-hmm.
And Mudgear socks are those kinds of things. Things in the gear store are those kinds of things. I will say this, gentlemen, get yourself outfitted. Life is too short to wear crappy socks and wear crappy gear and to be less durable and yet less useful than you would normally be. So go to the gear store, f3gear.com, or go to f3nation.com and find the gear tab, and you will find yourselves in the gear store where you can purchase any number of durable and useful products.
If you're going to be a winner, you're going to need a coach.
Sharpening doesn't happen by accident. A blade left untouched will rust, and a man left unchallenged will stagnate. Every man needs friction, resistance, and a whetstone to grind away weakness and reveal his true edge. Welcome to the Whetstone, where we reject comfort, disrupt the status quo, and forge men ready for impact. Hosted by Dredd, Dark Helmet, and me, the Plague. This is where men step out of the drift and into acceleration, because iron sharpens iron, and no man sharpens alone.
And we're back.
We're back. Yeah. Helmet, it's funny you mentioned the thing about reflective gear. I have to tell this story. I'm curious your perspectives if I responded right. But when I don't get to post, trying to let my M sleep in because she needs that. So I took my 3 girls on like a little ruck, right? I had the 3-year-old in the stroller, the 9-year-old walking next to me, and the baby in kind of the front backpack. And this was like 9:30, 10 in the morning. It's light out. And I had a gal in a car stop me and say, I love what you're doing, but you need more reflective gear.
At 10 o'clock in the morning.
Yeah. And
You live in like Alaska or something? Like I thought Omaha would be pretty
I
bright
don't
at 10
know.
o'clock. What
And
do I
so,
know?
so
Okay.
she says, she reminds me that she runs a lot, just so that I would know she's qualified to give me this advice.
Mm.
And in my head, I was thinking all these things, and then I just said, thanks for the feedback. And sort of asked her to have a good day. And then my 9-year-old says, she should feel pretty good about herself. And I'm like, should she? I don't know. So I don't know. So I'm torn. I'm like, maybe I should get some reflective gear, right? Because you hear all these stories, but then I'm like, it was bright out. Like, I don't know. So I don't know if you guys have any opinions or thoughts on that. But she had good intent. It just was sort of like an odd moment, and I wanted to remind her how much I run on the road at 4 a.m.
And what would that have gotten you?
Right. So I think I was trying to be a good driver. Maybe, I don't know.
Dredd, what do you think?
Yeah.
I agree.
She sounds like an officious intermeddler. And,
AKA Karen.
well, I am adverse to officious intermeddling. And so I admire your response.
I was going to say the same thing.
The disciplined response of a minivan centurion.
Yes.
Good for you.
The thank you for your feedback that was a very excellent response.
In the moment,
I could not say that I would have done the same.
If my kids weren't with me, it might not have been the same. But
I like to say you may have a point, and I'm going to think about it.
Also,
because both those things, both of those things are non-responsive.
Yeah.
So you should really wear reflective gear. You might have a point, because also you might not.
You might not. Yeah.
And I'm going to think about it.
Yeah.
Which means I'm not going to do anything.
Yeah.
I've kind of stopped. Like, I used to think it was a virtue to be very direct with people. Why don't you consider this? I was like, no, I'm not going to.
Mm-hmm.
And now that I would justify under the golden rule and say, that's what I would rather have. I just want you to tell me the truth. Don't give me some, but I ultimately have switched, what do they call it? The titanium rule, whatever it is.
A platinum.
Platinum. Not the way I want to be treated, but by the way that person wants to be treated. So this person, the officious intermeddler, wants to be taken seriously. And you need to, I believe I need to say something, communicate to them that I'm taking them seriously, even though I'm not. Because I believe that wearing reflective gear simply targets you for the redneck. And I think I'd rather.
No. Oh, all right.
I'd rather keep a careful lookout and avoid you and then target myself for the redneck. So
I hate to say it, but it is a place of my life where I look and go, so now I have outsourced my responsibility for my own safety to a vest.
Mm-hmm.
And so I can't bring myself to do it.
Yep. Yeah. We were walking on you walk, like basically on the same side of the road as oncoming traffic. So you can see them if they don't see you, try to make eye contact, right? All that sort of stuff. But yeah, it was an interesting moment. I just love my daughter's response that she should feel good about herself. Like, wait a minute.
You know what? 9-year-old logic.
To be fair, everybody has their thing. Like, although I don't believe in reflective vests and stuff, I do believe in running against traffic. And I see a lot of people who don't do that.
Which I do.
And I have to admit, I have an urge to say something, but it's so small. I mean, and I've never done it in my entire life.
What would you like to say? Like, hey, be safer if you were on the other side of the road, kind of thing.
Something, encouraging, like, hey, idiot. No, I don't.
Very encouraging. Yes.
It never gets to the point where I think of words.
Yeah, I don't actually formulate an actual coherent thought around it.
But
I hear you.
It's the same way I see people running with scissors. I feel like saying, don't do that.
Yeah.
But you're a grown man.
And I say, look, you lose one eye, chances are good you'll learn that lesson. Yep.
You weren't
going to play basketball anyway. Your depth perception is probably not that important. So it's fine.
I do like to wait till someone asks me. So for instance, I never drink anything during a trial for two reasons. One, if you get to the point where you have to use the bathroom, you can't just say, I need a potty break.
Yeah, 5 minutes.
Or the execrable what do they call it? Organic brake? What do you guys call
bio break. That's the corporate term. Yeah, a little bio break.
Yeah, bio break. Millennial substitution for I have to take a piss.
Yeah.
So I tell the young lawyers, don't. And the other reason is because whatever you got, you're going to spill on your paper.
No matter what, right? That's fair.
Right.
Yeah.
So I go as far as if you're in trial, that every break they put water out, and I move that water like behind the bench and stuff. But I don't tell anybody why I'm doing it. And ultimately somebody will ask me and I'll say, it's my advice. I like to let a guy actually have a full bladder and be in pain and say, oh, no, I can't stand it anymore. I said, that's why. That's why.
It's funny, and I know we're kind of half joking when you say that, but like,
what I just said.
So you had a little bit of a smirk, so I wasn't sure, but
I got another smirk because millennials have had it ingrained in their head that they have to drink an unbelievable amount of water.
Yeah,
and
gotta be hydrated.
If they don't, are not carrying their own personalized water bucket, that they're not going to survive.
A tank of water.
When I was in the Army, of course, we had canteens because we weren't anywhere near a spigot. We're out in a wood line. But if I was anywhere near a spigot, I didn't feel the obligation to carry my own bucket of water.
Yeah.
Just doesn't make any sense. But I was like, where are you headed there, millennial? I mean, are we heading out to the desert or something? Why are you carrying your own water?
You don't need 64 ounces.
Yeah. My kitchen's quite a ways away, but hey, so last episode, Helmet and I really started diving into some of the F3 like leadership, right? How F3 leadership is countercultural, right? It's way different than what you would see in the corporate world. We were kind of talking about like how odd it would look, right? If I walked into work and just said, I'm done doing this job. I'm going to hand it off to Steve, and he's going to take over. And if some of those,
I've been preparing him. He's ready.
Yeah,
made the promotion yourself. Yeah.
Okay. But I wanted to kind of talk through, as we think about the decentralized leadership model. I wanted to talk about I have read all these different leadership books, right? And there's always like different leadership archetypes, or you've got like the servant leader, or there's I think of like the climber, or the maybe the lone wolf, the rescuer. There's all these different archetypes is what I feel like they're always called. But I wanted to get your guys' thoughts on like, does the decentralized model that we're following in F3, does that build a leadership, like a certain type of leader, or does that really help each guy become the leader he was destined to be? I don't know. I'd be curious your thoughts on how does that work?
It's aimed at developing the sua sponte leader. That's the leader of his own accord. That's what sua sponte means, of his own accord. So it's aimed at developing the type of leader who understands the mission and looks to act in furtherance of it without specific instructions from anyone.
Now, how he does
that's his goal.
Yeah. Right. But how, because I was just going to say, I think you're talking about like, a servant leader, or this kind of leader, or that kind of leader. And so the sua sponte principle should underpin all of it in F3 leadership. But whether that guy decides to do it, as a servant, or as a this, or as a that, maybe there's some room in there. We would say there's probably a best practice when you say, Dredd, like there's probably
for me, the phrase servant leader is like saying wet water. All leaders are servants.
Right.
Servant leader doesn't have any resonance to me. If you're not a servant, you're not a leader. So
that's a good point. Yeah.
So help me unpack that a little bit. Is it so I show up to F3 and I'm a bat flipper, right? It's sort of a term that I think of, or do you teach me am I still a bat flipper, but I've learned through F3 how to lead, or how does it all?
So I think you're talking about personalities.
Yeah. Okay. Which is a little different, right?
So different leadership guys have different, the leadership principle is the same for everybody, but you don't alter your personality to do it. So, we used to do this thing, and I loved it. I wish we could bring it back. It was really OBT's thing about the tent pole. Mm-hmm. And, it's like had bat flippers on the one end and, more introverted guys on the other, but, or more, I guess, fine. I mean, the idea of the bat flipper, the idea of the bat flipper is that you take a certain sense of celebration in violating the rules and norms of the organization that you determine are nonsensical. And so you flip your bat. Like, you are following the mission, you're missional, but you're not doing the things that you determine are irrelevant, or you know and you glorify into it. Now, I am by nature a bat flipper. However, I move to the center of the tent because bat flipping is a obstacle for people who are not. They see it as an obstacle, and it will cause them not to want to follow. Like it turns them away. Now, Paul the Apostle writes about this in terms of, he calls them strong Christians and weak Christians. And he does not mean physical strength or anything like that. What he means is, for a strong Christian, is one who's governed primarily by faith, for whom there don't need to be a lot of, I say, rules and regulations. Whereas the weak Christian was one who needed the rules and regulations. And Paul was a strong Christian, but he said, I set aside my right to act as a strong Christian, so I won't be an obstacle to the weak Christian. And he was speaking specifically about food dedicated to idols. So he said, idols hold no strength; they're fake. So it doesn't matter if food is sacrificed or dedicated. I can't remember exactly the right word to use. That has no meaning. So if you tell me it is and I eat it, that's not a sin. It doesn't mean anything. But if it means something to you, then I'm not going to flout my freedom in your face, because that makes it more onerous for you to follow Christ. In the inverse, he says to the weak Christian, nor should you insist upon strong Christians following rules that they don't necessarily believe are rules. You should not do that either, because you will be an impediment, and it destroys the unity of the church. Now, you can take that idea and put it in any organization. There's always going to be people along the continuum of any organization who need more rules. To wit, they need a rule that says we wear reflective vests in the dark. And you'll always have a guy who says, the hell with that. Right?
Yeah.
And we can't have, it can't be that you can't work out together. Now, the way I deal with that, I hope, is humor. There's a guy in Metro who'll show up and he'll actually hand you,
and you have to put one on.
He'll try to get you to put them on.
He'll try and get you to put them on. Yeah.
Right.
These little slap bracelet reflecty things.
Yeah, right. Yeah. And he's a very sincere guy and a great guy. And I like to say to him when he says that, I say no, and I say exactly what I just said before, which is, I'd rather not target myself to the redneck. And I'm just kidding. Right. But I also will put it on. And so I am hopefully standing in the middle of the tent. This is the whole idea of the tent pole, is that I'm standing in the middle, and the ends are like the guy wires that are giving it tension. It's good to have bat flippers and conformists. It's good to have them.
You got to have them. And I think, when we you were talking about kind of leadership styles and things like that. And we kind of determine, yes, personality types, but that's the beauty, I think, of F3 leadership, because it is shared leadership, generally speaking, or it ought to be. Yeah. If a Nantan wants to act all by himself and do that, certainly if he can lead guys and guys are willing to follow him, that's okay. But I think we talked about it in the last episode too. We were talking about CEOs and yes men. And I said, I think in F3, we really try and recruit no men to our shared leadership teams.
All the men, but no men.
That's right. Yeah. I'm everywhere, but nowhere. No, but but I have to recruit those guys who are on the opposite side of the tent for me. I will say my hope is that, Dredd, in 12 years, when I am roughly as old as you are, maybe I'll move toward the middle of the tent better. Because right now I still think I sit a little too far sometimes on one end. And the only way I know to combat that is that I have not done it myself in my heart as well as maybe I should. So I keep guys around me that pull me, that force me toward the middle of the tent better, because I'm just not as practiced, I guess, in, being as gentle and willing and that kind of thing. A guy starts to hand me the reflective, little band things, and I just go, yeah, no, I'm not doing that. And when I probably should say, oh, thanks, man. I appreciate you caring about my, my safety, kind of like the lady you mentioned at the beginning, right? To say like, oh, well, I appreciate the feedback. That's very helpful, or whatever you would say.
Yeah.
I'm not quite there, to be honest. And so I, even at workouts, I generally try really hard never to post without my shield lock nearby. We all go to the same workouts, generally speaking, because I have failed many times, not a ton, right? But many, a number of times where I have failed to stay more toward the middle of the tent because a guy's just driving me nuts about something, or he's chirping in my face about something, and I don't handle it all that well. And so now I have to I pull. I mean, you can ask Maximus, it will tell you 100 stories, where I grab his arm and I'm just like, hey, run with me a bit, would you? And he's like, oh, good. In fact, he can just sort of look around the circle now at the beginning, and he kind of knows, and he's like, hey, you're going to run with me this time, or whatever, right? Because he knows, and I have to keep those guys around. But I think that's, when you're talking about it's decentralized, yes, but it's also companionized, right? You got to have guys in there.
As I'm hearing you guys talk through this, it almost feels like the beauty, like something about we're open to all men, and we're asking every guy to sort of lead, make their own decisions, and there are very few rules. Does that sort of create an environment that sort of forces us to work on our personality issues that might prevent us from being a good leader? Or I don't know, as I'm hearing you unpack it.
I'm not sure if he's asking facetiously, like as a setup, because it feels like a setup. Right? He's like, well, oh, what do you say that maybe?
No, I guess
he's probably asking genuinely, but
yeah, is that like by design? It feels like that's how it works. Because when I think about my job, we have an abundance of rules, and then like when you go hire somebody, right? You're looking for a specific type of person, right? You're not just like, come on in, anybody that wants to come in. So I don't know. It feels like just the environment, and maybe it's the core principles that lead us down this path of like refining men and into leaders. I don't know.
Yeah, I think 100%. I'd love to hear Dredd's thoughts, but I heard you mention your job, and again, I would just urge men never to stop conflating your job as a place that leaders are grown. They're not.
Sure.
That's not what that's for. So remember that also that F3 is not a business, and so it will never function like a business. It is a movement. And that's what it is for. And it has a very specific purpose. And we're playing a very, very long game in this. On the business side, in the corporate world, they have a finite game that they're playing. They have certain metrics they got to meet by certain times. They got things they have to do in order to win, their game, right? We don't have to do anything over here. We choose to do those things. And that's why we're a maximum liberty organization, right? The more that men have the freedom to choose, the better off the results we think we're going to get because of what we're trying to grow and to cultivate in men, right? So just before we kind of get too far down there, like I just wanted to say it out loud and say, don't quit putting those two things together. They're never going to match. It's just never going to meet up in the middle. It's just not going to happen because they're not supposed to.
Yeah. Yeah, that's really helpful. I know I have tried to apply things from F3 to my work, but I haven't ever done the inverse. I haven't found an opportunity where I'm like, this thing we do at work would go really well at F3. I don't know.
Sure, well, I mean, there's certain things, right? I mean, there's organizational things and stuff that you ought to do, that you do at work that we hope you would bring to F3 to make it better. Maybe, because there's places where organization is helpful. There's places where, some of the things that you'll do at work would absolutely be helpful. Right? It's just a matter of kind of, the leader knows when to apply and when not to apply versus the manager who says, what's a rule? So we're applying it all the time.
It's funny. This is what the blog post I'm working on right now, which will be out before this comes out, is about this very topic, which is the invitation from the culture to separate your work and your personal life. separate them. And I say, this, we've talked about this before, but I said, this to me is the ultimate point of two phones, is to have your work on one and your personal life on the other, because they're separate. They're not to be one. And the ultimate dramatic exposition of this would be the television series Severance. And very briefly, chip implanted in the employee's head. When he comes in the morning, it erases his personal life. He doesn't have any memory of it. Doesn't know if he's married, doesn't know any children. When he leaves at night, it erases his work life. He goes home, he can't remember what he did that day, doesn't even really know what he does. He just knows where he works. They volunteer to have that implanted in their head. The idea, of course, is ostensibly to create a more productive and efficient employee, and one who does not take his work home with him at night, because that violates the cultural catechism. So it seems like a good idea, but as it plays out, the work guy and the personal guy become two separate people and hate each other. And it's fascinating.
I need to watch this. Yeah.
Yeah, it's fascinating. And so the two phone thing, while less dramatic, obviously, is pointing in the same direction, because it's implying to you that you're not supposed to be what C.S. Lewis calls an integrated man. And this is a man for whom his faith, his principles, everything in his life are the same regardless of where he is. A disintegrated man then would be a man who is living two separate lives. And I believe the corporate culture encourages men to do that. And that having the two phones is physical manifestation of that encouragement. And what that causes you to do is to constantly be in search of this work-life balance, unicorn
jumbo,
thing,
yeah.
right? And think, well, if you tell me that when I'm within the four walls of my business, that I have to deny my faith or the things I believe, those aren't applicable here, that's going to make me crazy.
Mm-hmm.
And if I'm at home, and at home I'm not supposed to even consider anything I learned, heard, or what, I'm not supposed to take that home with me. Well, the creation of these two selves, the disintegration of these two selves, just doesn't work. I don't think it's working amongst men now. I think it's contributing to stag clown syndrome. And so to live in an integrated life as a man, you have to work against the culture. You have to go to work and find a way to do it. I mean, they can make you carry two phones, but they can't make you sever yourself. Only you have to agree to do that by consent. Now, it's easy for me to say that because I am HR. I have a small business. I can do what I want. I recognize it's much
You're
more
both
difficult.
the provider and the user of the one phone.
That's right.
Yeah.
And so I can say, you're free to come to work and wear out your faith, whatever you want to do, as long as you're doing your job and you're being respectful of other people who may disagree with you. Say that's at the end of the day, that's F3 right there. That's another problem with the severance idea, is it doesn't teach people how to do that, how to be fully themselves and yet respect other people. It like sets up the safe space where, okay, we're all going to be fake in here in this safe space.
Yeah, you're not actually safe. You're just
you're not. It's
because there's no danger. It's
right.
not safety if there's no danger, right?
Right. It's intellectual Ozempic. It's you're.
That's good.
It's just that's all it is.
Yeah.
And so I say, so when you say, Doug, where this took us, you guys saying are the things that apply in F3 and think everything should apply.
Yeah.
You should be the way you manage and lead your subordinates at work should be in accordance with F3 leadership principles. If you were an F3 guy and you believe them,
Yeah.
I shouldn't be at work saying to a guy, "Well, I'm going to pass the blame here, man." Why? Because I can. Because it's two different places.
Yeah. Exactly. Yeah. Because I'm the boss and I'm allowed.
Right. That's right.
The idea, all truth can be circumscribed into one great whole, right? I mean, you can draw one line around and all truth can fit in there. And so it doesn't matter, like we talk about and hopefully I didn't misstep what I was describing, because I think I was trying to say the same thing, where it's like, well, I would hope that you would bring the good principles from work and put them in F3. I would hope it would be a two-way thing. I hope that's kind of what I was saying there. But the idea that, if truth is truth, it doesn't really matter where you are. And it's kind of like your purpose, right? When we talk about like, hey, whatever your purpose is, then no matter where you are, you know what you're supposed to be doing when you get there, kind of thing.
Yeah.
And in a similar way, where like, if it's a good principle of leadership, I don't care if you learned it from a hobo.
Yeah.
Like, it doesn't really matter. I would hope that you would bring that there, and I would hope that you would grab that hobo and say, man, I think you got potential, brother. I think there's something in you that's greater than what you're doing right now. So why don't you come with me and let's see if we can unlock more of that.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah. It's interesting to me because in the corporate setting, we encourage separation, but then we ask people, like I'm thinking of a survey question we have, or I've seen on a survey. It's not at my place of work, of course, but it's a question that asks.
I read about in a book.
Other place.
Yeah.
It's a question that asks if you feel like you can bring your true and authentic self to work. But to your point,
Dredd's eyes are about to roll out of his head. I can feel it.
People can't do that if we're asking them to separate. And I guess something
that's ridiculous.
Yeah,
you don't want my authentic self, because that guy likes women like Beanie Babies and wants nothing but power and wealth.
Yeah.
I mean, why would you want that guy?
Right.
Right. So I suppose that would be a category. That would be a category error in the question, attributing virtue to the idea of authenticity. That would be a problem, right?
Mm-hmm.
Yeah,
that would be a problem.
Yeah, something that I've struggled with, and maybe it's a concentric question, but I think it relates to what we're talking about. Is as I've held, and it's interesting to use this term, but as I've been in different F3 leadership positions, figuring out where that fits, because some of it's kind of mammon, right? It's like I'm having to do administrative stuff on a website.
I hear you.
So I would be curious, Helmet, like how are you managing that, or how did you see that as Nantan? Like, is Nantan
I work 80 hours a week. Yeah. 50 of them are on F3, and then 30. No, I'm just kidding.
Yeah.
Yeah. So sorry. What was the question? How do you
prioritize? Where does the sort of F3 leadership role fit in your concentrica?
So I say this to guys all the time. Right. F3 is not on your concentrica.
Okay.
There is no F3 in my concentrica. There's no leadership role that exists in my concentrica, unless, as I do, you consider husband and father as leadership roles.
Yes. Yeah.
In my shield lock, I guess you might be able to convince me. And then if I have a leadership role at my mammon, it's because it was, given to me. Mm-hmm. It's not because of, like they said, okay, you're going to be it's wonderful. I would consider myself in a leadership role at work because of who I am and how I live my life.
You lead everywhere you go.
I don't have any direct reports.
Mm-hmm.
There's not a department that reports into me. Right.
Not yet.
In fact, at this mammon there ain't going to be, but maybe one day, but it's irrelevant. Right. And so I'll tell you, this was one of the greatest, and I still hold it as maybe one of the greatest compliments I've ever received. And I'm only telling the story because it's the right story to tell, I think, right now, but it is about Dredd. Forgive me, Dredd. But he said to me, and this was because I was really twisted up for a long time about Mammon. And we referenced a couple episodes ago about the kind of this 3-hour, I remember I cried. It was a jerker. It hurt. We went through a lot of stuff in there. And because I just could not seem to flip this idea in my head about my mammon and what my worth really was and my identity really was, and how I had tied it up so much into being, an entrepreneur and a business owner and an employer. And, and if I don't have those things, then I'm nothing. And, all this kind of stuff, right? I was really in my head about it. And he talked me through, and we mentioned, about our buddy, I'll just name him, our buddy Snapfade, who It's one of the most effective human beings I've ever been around. I mean, I don't know how I could love a guy, more than that. I mean, he's just a great dude. And he's not an entrepreneur, right? To my knowledge, he never was, but he certainly was an effective leader and always is. I mean,
he worked for the largest financial institution in America his entire career.
Yeah. And was very successful at it, and climbed, and did the things that he needed to do to put himself in a financial situation so that he can do what he's doing now, which is coaching men, which, the guy can't help himself. And that led to the compliment, which was Dredd said, "Look, man, you don't really get it, do you?" And I was like, "I'm not really sure what you mean." He's like, "I could make you the greeter at Costco, and in a couple of months, you'd be running the place." And I was like, "I don't know that I totally understand what you mean." And he was like, "It's either in you or it ain't in you, man. Like, because of who you are, because of how you live your life, because of how you act, that's where you would end up. That's just what would happen, right?"
Mm-hmm.
And it's this. I think it's along the same lines as kind of this integrated man idea, right? However you are, whoever you are, if you're that person all the time, then it will play out excellent for you everywhere, forever. And that's the funny thing. We're talking about all these things about the employer and this and whatever. These guys who want you to separate it, these guys who want you to have the two phones, they want you to do all the things, right? To hop through all the hoops and whatever. It is a high control desire.
Mm-hmm.
And what they don't understand, and where F3 runs truly countercultural, right? You make a guy the greeter at Costco. Same true of you, Plague. We do the same thing for you. We make you the greeter at Costco. You'd be running the place in no time, because that's just who you are. You can't help it, right? Because you're an integrated person. And so we can try and control you and tell you to stay in your lane, or whatever the thing is. Well, F3 refuses to do that. Number one, I don't know that we acknowledge lanes so much as we acknowledge missions,
Mm-hmm.
right? And there's overlap across men's missions, and that's okay. And men's purposes, I mean, they're all related in some way or other, right? Because we're all, as the scripture would say, same parts of the, different parts of the same body, right? So we're all in the same, purpose in a big ultimate sense, but I just have a different function in there. But this high control environment, the two phone environment, like, makes it so that you can't succeed. And what the guys who want the high control don't understand are at a certain place of employment, certainly not my own right now, we got a high control situation in our executive group. And I try, but it's not I may or may not work. Who knows? But what they don't understand is, and there's even research to bear it out, the more liberty, the more empowerment, the more decentralized they would be with their authority, the better results they would get. But you have to be willing to play the long-term game, and you have to be willing to fail some in the meantime. And they're not willing to take the long-term gains for the short-term failure. They'd rather have a short-term gain for the long-term failure.
Right.
They think. Well, and part of it is because they'll sell out before the long-term failure actually hits.
Yeah.
So what do they care?
Right.
Right.
Well, that's a good, because I think then in F3, like, we're not selling out because nobody's getting
There's
paid.
nothing to sell.
So then how do we, because what's amazing to me is you think about the history of F3, and then you think about where we're at today, and we keep splitting and growing. And I remember back in the day, Wait Time had a bunch of our Redwoods and kind of early F3 Omaha guys read the Starfish and the Spider book, and that paints this really cool picture. But how do you maintain the culture when you keep splitting and you haven't created rules, or like you haven't said, okay, this is the type of guy we're looking for to split and go this way? Or like, how do we do that? Like, how have you seen that work so successfully?
I think because we don't view leadership as a position, we view it as a relationship. So yeah, you could be designated as boss, manager, leader, whatever in your business, or you could wear a particular rank and hold particular position in the military, whatever. That really doesn't mean anything. what means something is the relationship you have with your followers. Are they following you? If people are following you and you hold no leadership position whatsoever, you're a leader. If you are the designated chief of all chiefs and no one will follow you anywhere, you're not a leader. And in the culture and most corporate organizations, it's the opposite. As it's viewed as a position, and then downstream of that comes the idea of the relationship, and that just doesn't work. It's been tried forever, and it doesn't work, and that's why people in those positions resort to compulsion and chicanery to get you to do stuff because they have to, because they can't do it through initiative because they don't have a relationship with you,
and they don't understand how to cultivate one. Like, because again, they are, and that's where I feel like how my mission in life plays out in my Mammon, right? Is I'm trying to help people to understand that they are limiting themselves by the beliefs that they hold regarding this control idea, right? And trying to help them to understand that the more that they will let go and the less that they will worry about it, the happier they're going to be, but also the better results that they will get for people, because no one loves to be in a relationship where they are controlled. No one. Ask any child to eat their vegetables and tell me how that's going to, right? No one wants to be in that kind of relationship. And so the more that a company or an organization of any kind works toward that, the more they're working against the heart of man. And if you're going to work against the heart of man, I mean, I just think you're going to fail.
Yeah. Is that curious, Helmut? Do you wonder if you could give us maybe a couple or an example of that? Because I'm thinking, like, I'm a pretty type A control freak, but but I don't. But I've tried to let go and sort of be like, well, if they can do it 80% as good as me, or but like, how does that show up? I guess give us some examples of that. In letting go of control
in any given situation.
Yeah,
I would say the first thing you have to do is be accepting of failure as a step in the process. That is a necessary part of the growth process, is allowing for that. This is going to make some people potentially shake their head and go, I don't even understand what you're saying. You can ask my kids. It's the absolute 100% gospel truth. I have never grounded one of my children. Now, I'm not saying that would work for everybody. Okay. So don't hear me as saying, oh, Helmut said I don't need to ground you, so go do whatever the crap you want, right? I don't know, because every kid is a little different. But my parenting style, my personal parenting style, was always that the natural consequence of a thing would probably do most of the teaching for me if I just sort of let it play out. Because I think that that's just how life is, right? I can't be there all the time. Now, of course, I would say things like, now look, and I'll tell you, my youngest one, she was the one that you said, don't you dare eat that broccoli. And then she would clear the plate. Nice. That's the way she rolls. Right. Nice. But, and it happened. Honey, that stove is hot. I mean, I'm telling you, this is not an exaggeration. Honey, the stove is hot, babe. Don't put your hand up there. And she would look right at you and go, And she had a blister. The whole side, her entire palm was blistered. Right? Now, I could have yelled at her. I could have said, oh my gosh, why were you so disobedient? Whatever. I gave you the information, and you looked at me and said, you can't tell me not to touch it. I'll touch it. And she's never done it again. But it wasn't because I said so, right? So I just, I think that leadership a lot of times is loving someone enough to let them fail. And then after the fact, when she had this gigantic blister, saying like, do you want to do something to kind of help, alleviate the pain? Or do you want to just sit in the pain? I'm here to support you in whatever it is you think you want to do. Mm-hmm. Right? Now, she wouldn't let us pop the blister. She wouldn't let us wrap the blister. It was there, but she didn't want anybody touching it. So she walked around for, I don't know, how many days or a week or whatever with this huge, but I didn't have to ground her. I didn't have to yell at her. I didn't have to do any of that kind of stuff. You know what I'm saying? And so I think that for me, again, my leadership style to a large degree is to say, hey, I'll give you as much good information as I possibly can. And that was why the whole invention of Stuff Worth Trying in the first place, right? Was to say, look, it's going to be different for you. It might be totally anti what I think we ought to put in here. I don't know. But in the absence of making your own, having your own stuff, like maybe try these things, see if that doesn't work for you, and then let them and love them, through the process.
I experienced this the last couple of days that illustrates this. Is the reason I'm even on this podcast right now. I was supposed to be in trial this week,
Hence
we settled it. We settled the case. So, as is often the case in civil litigation, we couldn't have a frank discussion about it between the parties until Friday. Trial Tuesday, because yesterday's Memorial Day. So finally, we started having a frank discussion about it. But of course, we've got all weekend. We usually work all weekend to get ready for the trial, and then we try the case next week. So it can be distracting to do all the back and forth, try to settle a case and get ready for trial at the same time. So I said to my associate, that's what we call the second chair, I said, all right, you settle the case, I'll prepare for trial. And he spent hours and hours and hours talking to opposing counsel who was talking to his client, talking to our client, and reaching what ended up being is pretty complicated, a lot of complexities to it. Meanwhile, I got ready for trial. Every once in a while, maybe 2 or 3 times over the weekend, he called me and said, will you look at something or ask me a question? And other than that, I looked at the emails to make sure you're making progress, but I did as much as I felt like I needed to do to get ready for trial, although there's some things I didn't do because it looked like we were going to settle a case and I didn't want to bill my client for something that was unnecessary. Anyway, by late yesterday, Memorial Day, he managed to get both sides to sign this agreement so that we could come to court today and announce that to the judge. And we walked in, and as we sat down, I said, you do it. Because he's the one who did the hard work, So judge calls the case. He gets up, says, Judge, good news. Managed to get the case solved over the weekend. Of course, the judge is happy to hear that. Everybody's happy. And we go to leave, and he said, look, I feel like I just want to take the rest of the day off. I mean, because I worked all weekend. I said, get your butt back to the office. No, I said,
you'll be chained to this chair until 5 o'clock.
I said, you decide. You've accomplished the mission. You decide what you're going to do today. Good work. You did very, very well. Now, that takes a couple things that may not seem evident to maybe a non-lawyer on my part, which is one, the client, he got all sorts of face time with the client. Client saw him do all these things. Didn't hear a word from me. Two, he gets to stand up in court and take the glory. If my ego is entering into this, and as we like to say, your ego is not your amigo, then maybe I interject myself into the process enough to make it look like I'm doing something I wasn't, that I'm in charge somehow, but I know that even though there's some temptation to do that, of course, I know that that's not the best outcome for the client, obviously, but certainly not for his professional development. So that's all F3 stuff. It sounds different because it's applied to my particular field. Another litigator would probably understand what I'm talking about. You guys are probably like, I don't know what you're talking about. But everybody in every field would have their own way to apply those principles of delegated leadership, right? Decentralized leadership, 80-20, passing the praise, taking the blame, all those things. You can see all the roots of those things. And it doesn't matter where you work or what you do, you can apply those principles because we're not tying them so closely to any one particular mammon that makes them narrowly applicable.
Right.
They're applicable everywhere. I don't care what you're.
It's a framework.
It's a framework.
Yeah.
But getting back to my original point, none of that would have worked if this associate of mine did not trust me and did not believe me when I said, you do this, I'll do that. I'm not gonna micromanage you. I'm not gonna wait and see what happens and come over the top and take credit for it. Nor if it fails, am I gonna say, oh gee whiz, you couldn't handle it. He knows because I've never done that in the past.
Mm-hmm.
So
well, he had to trust you, but you also had to trust him, right?
Very good
able
point.
to do those things.
I had to trust him because we've been working together for a long time, and I did trust him to do that, and I knew he could do it. So go ahead.
No. So if we rewind just a second, it sounds so. You asked the question, how do you decentralize this, and how do you have it be successful, right? And so I mentioned, I think you have to court failure and be willing to accept it and love a guy through it, right? I think the other thing is you have to develop trust. I think maybe that's step 2, right? Develop trust and be willing. And I can't remember who it gets attributed to most often, so I won't try and pretend. I'll just say Dredd said it. That'll be good. But it's amazing what right? If it's brilliant, probably was anyway. But it's amazing what we can accomplish if we don't care who gets the credit.
Mm-hmm.
Right? Who did say that? That's
right. It's a good
Churchill
one.
or something. Yeah, it's a really good one.
I think it was Churchill. Now that you say that,
it's a really good one. Yeah, really good one.
And sometimes, kind of like the lady, with the whatever it was, the reflective gear kind of thing. I think sometimes you just have to, like, at Mammon recently presented a plan that I presented it again a couple weeks ago. The same exact plan, copied and pasted from a plan that I presented in January, because it was right then and it's still right now. And now suddenly I'm smart, right? And because they had the idea, and then they're like, well, what if we did these things? And I was like, you mean these things that I showed you in January? Not a good choice. Don't do that, right? I just said, interesting. Tell me more, and that, right? And they tell you more, and then you're like, yeah, it's literally everything I wrote. That's fine. What do I care? What do I care? If I pointed it out to them, like, well, yeah, that's what I said in January. Now I'm a jerk, number one, right? Also, like, if it takes a few months, that's fine, whatever. I'm trying to trust, and you sort of let the things happen. But my point in saying that is just that if you don't care a bunch about, like Dredd said, like, if he had been like, Judge, my associate here did some work, but I just want you to know that I managed to settle this case.
Yeah.
Right. Well, I mean, A, baloney. B, that guy's never gonna. Why would I work for you if you're gonna steal the credit for everything that I do?
Mm-hmm. Yeah,
It'd be hard. So as the leader, I think what Dredd says. I think that's number 2, right? Is being willing to sacrifice your ego. So maybe there's 3 things in there, right? Court the failure, develop the trust, both ways with the leaders that you're training, and then maybe number 3 is remove your ego and say, I don't care who gets the credit.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah. The corollary to pass, praise, take blame is actually take much more blame than you deserve and pass much more credit than they deserve. Almost to the right up to the point where somebody might say, well, that's just too far.
Right. Yeah, where it shows, right?
That's right.
Exhortation.
That's right. Nothing breeds trust or makes you look like a stronger. And everybody, that's the thing, is it's against human nature, but everybody knows when you do it or fail to do it. They can see it. Whenever you do that, people know that you didn't do every little thing one way or the other. So if there is a failure, it's probably some other failure. Everybody knows that. But the fact that you just end the argument. How did this happen? It happened because I failed. Not I failed to supervise, because that's implicit that somebody, like coaches say this. Well, you lost. What happened? Well, I guess we didn't prepare our players. Oh, you didn't prepare them. Right.
Okay.
We lost because I failed. I didn't coach to victory. The L's are my responsibility. Why did you win? What are the secrets to winning? Having great players because they won the game. Simple. And I guess just hard because it's simple and true, right?
Yeah. Well, this is awesome, and I'm thinking of, I have so many more questions that I want to cover with you guys in future episodes, because I think there's still for me like a like I want to be able to teach, like I got to teach my team that like what F3 calls the leadership development process. Like I have to teach them that we're going to use that. Cause what I've had sometimes is like I'm trying to delegate authority and decision-making, and then people are sort of like, well, this is different. We don't really do this, and so there's some of that, and I just want to encourage guys, I think, it can get discouraging sometimes, right? Just failure. But for me, I'm going to keep this world from dragging me down, and I'm going to stand my ground. And you know what? I won't back down.
I wouldn't if I were you.
No, I wouldn't either.
Not
it
Geddy
won't
Lee.
work.
Hashtag not Geddy Lee. Not Geddy Lee.
Not Geddy Lee.
Not Geddy Lee. Awesome.